On October 13, 1972, a Fairchild FH-227D aircraft, operated by the Uruguayan Air Force, lifts off from Montevideo. On board are 45 passengers, players from the Old Christians Club rugby team, their families, friends, and crew, all headed to Chile for a friendly match. Spirits are high. For many, it's their first time flying over the Andes, the massive, unforgiving mountain range that stretches like a spine across South America. Snow-capped peaks pierce the sky, but inside the cabin, laughter and excitement fill the air. The flight plan includes an overnight stop in Mendoza, Argentina. On October 13th, they depart again, bound for Santiago. The skies ahead, however, are not friendly. A storm brews in the Andes. Clouds gather thick and fast. Visibility drops to near zero. The pilots, relying on visual references and limited radio communication, believe they've passed the mountains and begin descending toward what they think is flat terrain. But they're wrong. They are still surrounded by some of the highest peaks in the region. At 3:34 p.m., the aircraft slams into a ridge. The right wing is torn off, then the left. The tail snaps away. The fuselage hurtles down the mountainside, carving a trench in the snow, finally crashing into a desolate glacier at nearly 12,000 feet. Screams echo. Snow rushes in. Silence follows. 12 people die instantly. Others are critically wounded. The remaining survivors are dazed, shivering, and bleeding, surrounded by endless white wilderness. There are no trees, no animals, no sign of civilization, just cold, wind, and rising fear. They are completely isolated, and no one knows exactly where they are. What began as a joyful journey has now become a desperate fight for survival. And this is only the beginning. As the hours turned into days, the survivors of Flight 571 faced a grim new reality. They were stranded in the middle of the Andes. No trees, no animals, no help, just miles of snow and silence. The temperature dropped below -20°C at night. Their clothes, meant for a rugby match, were useless against the biting cold. They had no gloves, no boots, just sneakers, jackets, and the twisted remains of a plain fuselage. They quickly learned to improvise. They used seat cushions and insulation to cover themselves. They melted snow on metal parts, warmed by the sun to get drinking water. Still, hypothermia loomed, especially for the injured. Food was almost non-existent. A few chocolate bars, a tin of mussels, wine, peanuts. They rationed carefully, cutting tiny pieces of chocolate to last a day. But within a week, everything was gone. The young men took turns organizing the small space, checking on the wounded, and comforting each other. They tried to stay hopeful, believing rescue was just around the corner. After all, the crash had made the news. Surely help would come. On the 8th day, their only lifeline to the outside world came from a transistor radio, salvaged from the wreckage. One of them rigged wires and caught a weak signal. That's when they heard it.
Search for the missing Uruguayan plane has been called off. All passengers presumed dead.
Silence followed. Some broke down in tears. Others stared blankly into the snow. Hope, the only thing keeping them going, had just been buried under the same mountains that trapped them. But giving up was not an option. Not yet. With no vegetation or animals in sight and no food left, the survivors made a grim choice. To live, they would have to feed on the bodies of their deceased friends. It was a decision no one wanted, but after days of starvation, some saw it as the only path forward. They prayed, they cried, they spoke of love, not desperation. As horrifying as it was, it gave them the strength to keep going. Days turned into weeks. They patched injuries, shared stories, kept each other warm, bound together by a common will to survive. But time was running out. Rescue wasn't coming. Someone had to go for help, or they would all die on that mountain. Two of the strongest survivors, Fernando Parado and Roberto Canessa, volunteered to hike out. With scraps of gear and homemade snowshoes, they left on December 12th, 2 months after the crash. They climbed through the Andes for 10 days. Snow, ice, hunger, blisters. Each step could be their last. But they pressed on, guided by the desperate hope of saving their friends. On December 20th, they spotted a Chilean herder across a river. They shouted. He couldn't hear. The next day he returned and threw them a note tied to a rock. Parado wrote one back. I come from a plane that crashed in the mountains. I am Uruguayan. We have been walking for 10 days. I have 14 friends still alive. Please help us. The miracle was about to begin. Helicopters arrived on December 22nd, guided by the herder and the Chilean army. The valley was so remote that it took 2 trips over 2 days to bring everyone out. In total, 16 survived. 72 days after the crash, the world was stunned by the incredible story. There was controversy over how they survived, but most saw it for what it was, a testament to the power of the human spirit. The survivors, now elderly, still gather. They speak not just of tragedy, but of unity, love, and the bonds forged in the harshest of places. Their story has been told in books, documentaries, and films, most recently in the acclaimed 2023 movie, Society of the Snow. What happened on that mountain was beyond survival. It was a miracle.